The invitation arrived in a crumpled envelope shoved under the apartment door, and Rose knew it was a trap the second she saw the gold lettering. She stood in the narrow hallway of her tiny downtown studio, still wearing her yellow cleaning gloves, and stared at the fancy card like it might bite her. The words were printed in swirling letters that probably cost more than her rent. You are cordially invited to the annual charity gala at the Bellmont estate. Black tie required. Saturday, 7 p.m. At the bottom, in handwriting so perfect it looked fake, someone had added, "Hope you can make it, Rose. It would mean so much to see you there. Yours truly, Victoria Bellmont." Rose's hands started shaking. Victoria Bellmont. The name alone made her stomach twist into knots. She was the wife of Julian Bellmont, the youngest CEO in the city, a man whose face was plastered on every business magazine and billboard downtown. Victoria was known for three things: her perfect blonde hair, her charity work that always seemed to involve photographers, and her cruelty. Rose had cleaned their massive penthouse every Tuesday and Friday for 6 months, and in that time, Victoria had never once looked her in the eye. She would walk past Rose like she was a piece of furniture, sometimes holding her nose when Rose was nearby, other times making loud comments to her friends on the phone about the help and how hard it was to find decent people these days. This invitation was not kindness. This was a setup. Rose could feel it in her bones, but something else burned inside her too. Something that had been building for months, maybe years. A fire that refused to go out, no matter how many times people like Victoria tried to snuff it. If you're feeling this story already, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the like button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I want to know who's riding with Rose on this journey. Now, let's get back to it. Rose walked to the cracked mirror hanging by her front door and looked at herself. Her dark skin was still glowing with sweat from scrubbing floors all day. Her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, a few curls escaping around her temples. She was 32 years old and she was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being treated like dirt. But she was not broken. Not even close. She thought about throwing the invitation in the trash. That would be the smart thing. The safe thing. But Rose had spent her whole life being smart and safe. And where had it gotten her? Cleaning up after people who wouldn't spit on her if she was on fire. No. She was going to that gala, and she was going to walk in with her head high. The next morning, Rose woke up before sunrise like she always did. She made herself a cup of instant coffee and sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the invitation propped up on her nightstand. The gala was in 5 days. She had no dress, no shoes, no jewelry, and definitely no money to buy any of it. Her savings account had $23 in it. Her checking account had $47. She got paid next week, but that money was already spoken for. Rent, electricity, phone bill, groceries. There was nothing left over for fancy dresses and fairy tales. But Rose was resourceful. She had to be. When you grow up with nothing, you learn how to make something out of scraps. She spent the day cleaning houses like usual. 3 different apartments in 3 different neighborhoods. Rich people who left their messes for her to fix. She smiled and nodded and said, "Yes, ma'am," and "No, sir," until her jaw ached. But her mind was somewhere else. Her mind was planning. That evening, she took the bus across town to the neighborhood where her aunt lived. Aunt Diane was 70 years old and had worked as a seamstress her whole life. Her hands were twisted with arthritis now, but her eye for fabric and style was still sharp as a blade. When Rose walked into the small house that smelled like lavender and old books, Aunt Diane took one look at her face and said, "What kind of trouble are you walking into, baby girl?" Rose told her everything. The invitation, Victoria, the trap. Aunt Diane listened without interrupting, her dark eyes steady and calm. When Rose finished, the old woman stood up slowly, her joints popping like firecrackers. "Come with me," she said. She led Rose to a back bedroom that was filled with boxes and old furniture. In the corner, covered with a white sheet, was a large wardrobe made of dark wood. Aunt Diane pulled the sheet off, and dust filled the air like tiny stars. She opened the wardrobe, and Rose's breath caught in her throat. Inside were dresses. Beautiful, timeless dresses from another era. Silks and satins in deep colors. Beadwork that shimmered even in the dim light. These were your grandmother's, Aunt Diane said quietly. She was a singer back in the day, performed at jazz clubs all over the city. She had style, that woman. Real style. Not the kind you buy, the kind you're born with. She pulled out a dress that made Rose's heart stop. It was a deep emerald green, the color of forests and secrets. The fabric was soft as water, and it had a neckline that would sit just off the shoulders. Simple, elegant, timeless. Try it on, Aunt Diane said. Rose slipped into the dress in the tiny bathroom, and when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The dress fit like it had been made for her body. It hugged her curves in all the right places and flowed down to the floor like a river. She looked powerful. She looked expensive. She looked like someone who belonged anywhere she decided to stand. When she walked back out, Aunt Diane smiled so wide her whole face crinkled up. "That's my girl," she whispered. "Now, let them try to ignore you." The night of the gala, Rose took 3 buses to get to the Bellmont estate. It was located on the edge of the city, a sprawling mansion surrounded by iron gates and perfectly trimmed hedges. When she stepped off the last bus, her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She walked up to the gate, where a man in a black suit was checking invitations. He looked at her with surprise, then suspicion. She handed him the card without a word. He scanned it, his eyebrows raising slightly, then waved her through. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, luxury sedans and sports cars that cost more than most people made in 10 years. Rose walked past them in her grandmother's dress and a pair of simple black heels she had borrowed from a coworker. Her head was high. Her spine was straight. The front doors of the mansion were wide open, spilling golden light and the sound of a live orchestra into the cool night air. Rose stepped inside, and it was like stepping into a different world. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings, painted with clouds and angels. The floors were polished marble that reflected everything like a mirror. Men in tuxedos and women in glittering gowns stood in clusters, holding champagne glasses and laughing at jokes that probably weren't funny. And then she saw Victoria. She was standing near the grand staircase, surrounded by a group of women who all looked like they had been poured from the same mold. Blonde hair, thin bodies, diamonds dripping from their ears and necks. Victoria was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than Rose made in a year, and she was laughing at something, her head thrown back like she didn't have a care in the world. Then her eyes landed on Rose. The laughter died in her throat. Her face went through a series of expressions so fast it was almost funny. Surprise, confusion, then something ugly, something mean. She whispered something to the women around her, and they all turned to look. Rose felt their eyes like cold water. But she didn't stop walking. She moved through the crowd like she owned the place, her emerald dress flowing behind her. Victoria stepped forward, blocking her path. Up close, Rose could see the shock in her eyes. She had expected Rose to show up in something cheap and embarrassing, or not show up at all. She had not expected this. "Rose," Victoria said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You actually came. How surprising." "You invited me," Rose said simply. Her voice was calm, steady. "I did, didn't I?" Victoria's smile was sharp as broken glass. "I just thought it would be nice for you to see how the other half lives. You know, for perspective." The women around her giggled like trained seals. Rose felt the anger rising in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She had not come here to make a scene. She had come here to stand, to exist, to refuse to be erased. Before she could respond, a voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Victoria, are you going to introduce me to your guest?" Rose turned and found herself looking up at Julian Bellmont himself. He was tall, with dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples and eyes that were sharp and intelligent. He was wearing a perfectly tailored tuxedo, and he looked at Rose with an expression she couldn't quite read. Victoria's face went tight. "This is Rose. She's..." She cleans our penthouse. She cleans, Julian repeated, his eyes still on Rose. And you invited her to our gala? It's for charity, Victoria said quickly, her voice rising just a little. I thought it would be a nice gesture. If you're still watching, I need you to do something for me real quick. Smash that like button if you want to see where this goes. Drop a comment and tell me if you think Rose should walk away or stand her ground. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Let's get back to it. Julian's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. He extended his hand to Rose. It's nice to meet you, Rose. She shook his hand, and his grip was firm, respectful. He held her gaze for just a moment longer than necessary, and she saw something there. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. Enjoy the evening, he said, and then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd with Victoria trailing behind him like a shadow. Rose stood there for a moment, her heart racing. She felt like she had just survived the first test, but she knew there would be more. She moved through the party, staying on the edges, watching. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and tiny food that looked more like art than meals. People talked about vacations to places Rose had only seen in pictures. They complained about problems that weren't really problems at all. And then she saw her, an older woman standing alone near the window, looking out at the garden. She was black, maybe in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist. She was wearing a simple black dress, but she carried herself like royalty. Rose walked over, drawn by something she couldn't name. Beautiful night, Rose said quietly. The woman turned and smiled. It is, though I've always found these parties a bit ridiculous. Rose laughed before she could stop herself. The woman's eyes twinkled. I'm Dorothy, she said, extending her hand. Rose. I know, Dorothy said. I heard Victoria introduce you. Or should I say, try to humiliate you. Rose's defenses went up. You heard that? Honey, everyone heard that. Victoria's voice carries when she's trying to make someone feel small. Dorothy sipped her champagne. But you handled it well. Better than most would. I almost didn't come, Rose admitted. She didn't know why she was being honest with this stranger, but something about Dorothy made her feel safe. But you did, and that takes courage. Dorothy looked at her closely. What do you do, Rose? And I don't mean what job you have. I mean, what do you do? What moves you? The question caught Rose off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. I write. Poetry, mostly. And I volunteer at the community center downtown, teaching kids to read. Dorothy's smile grew wider. A poet and a teacher. Now that's interesting. They talked for over an hour. Dorothy told her about her life, about growing up in the South during segregation, about becoming the first black woman to own a law firm in the city, about fighting every single day to be seen as more than what people assumed she was. The thing about people like Victoria, Dorothy said, is that they're terrified. They build walls around themselves and call it superiority. But really, it's just fear. Fear that if they let people like us in, they'll realize we're just as good as them, maybe better. Rose felt something shift inside her. She had spent so long feeling small, feeling less than. But talking to Dorothy reminded her of something she had forgotten. She was not less than anyone. She was just different. And different was not a weakness. The night was winding down when Victoria appeared again. She had clearly had too much champagne. Her face was flushed, and her eyes were mean. Having fun? She asked Rose, her voice loud enough to turn heads. I bet this is quite the experience for you. Must be nice to pretend you're one of us for a night. The crowd around them went quiet. Rose felt every eye in the room turn toward her. This was it. This was the moment Victoria had been building toward all night. The humiliation, the joke. Rose opened her mouth to respond, but Dorothy stepped forward first. Victoria, she said, her voice calm, but carrying a weight that made everyone lean in. Do you know who I am? Victoria blinked, confused. No. Should I? I'm Dorothy Langston. I sit on the board of directors for Bellmont Industries. I'm also the one who approved your husband's last 3 major contracts. She let that sink in. And Rose here is my goddaughter. The lie came out so smooth and natural that even Rose almost believed it. Victoria's face went white. Your goddaughter? That's right, Dorothy said. I asked Rose to come tonight. I wanted to see how your charity event was run. I wanted to see if the Bellmonts were the kind of people worth supporting. She looked around the room slowly. I'm not impressed. The silence was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Victoria looked like she might faint. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, like a fish gasping for air. I I didn't know. No, you didn't, Dorothy said. Because you didn't bother to ask. You saw a black woman who cleans houses and decided she was beneath you. You invited her here as a joke, to make yourself feel superior. But the joke, Victoria, is on you. Julian appeared then, moving through the crowd with purpose. His face was hard. What's going on here? Dorothy turned to him. Your wife invited my goddaughter to this event as a form of entertainment. She wanted to humiliate her in front of your guests. I find that behavior unacceptable. Julian's jaw tightened. He looked at Victoria, and the disappointment in his eyes was clear. Is this true? Victoria's mouth opened and closed. It was just, I thought. You thought wrong, Julian said quietly. The anger in his voice was controlled, but it was there. Excuse us. He took Victoria's arm and led her away. The crowd slowly started talking again, pretending they hadn't just witnessed a public humiliation. But Rose knew they had seen everything. And they wouldn't forget. Dorothy squeezed Rose's hand. Come on, let's get out of here. They left together, walking out into the cool night air. Rose felt like she was floating. Like she had just witnessed something impossible. Why did you do that? She asked Dorothy when they were alone. You don't even know me. I know enough, Dorothy said. I know you showed up tonight, even though you knew it was a trap. I know you held your head high when most people would have crumbled. And I know that people like Victoria need to be reminded that their money and their status don't make them better than anyone. She smiled. Besides, I saw something in you. Potential. Fire. And I don't like seeing fire get snuffed out. Rose felt tears burning in her eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Dorothy said, because I'm not done with you. I want you to come work for my firm. Not as a cleaner, as an assistant. I'll pay for you to go back to school if that's what you want. Or I'll train you in law. Whatever path you choose, but I'm not letting talent like yours go to waste. Rose stared at her in shock. I don't understand. Why would you do this for me? Because someone did it for me once, Dorothy said simply, and because I believe in paying it forward. So what do you say? Rose didn't even have to think about it. Yes, absolutely. Before we get to the end, I need you to do one more thing. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like and comment where you're watching from. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Now, let's finish this. 6 months later, Rose walked into the community center downtown, wearing a navy suit she had bought with her first real paycheck. She was working at Dorothy's law firm now, learning the business, taking night classes in legal studies. Her life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. She was there to teach her weekly poetry class for the kids. 20 children between the ages of 7 and 14, all of them from neighborhoods like the one she grew up in, all of them hungry for something more. As she walked into the classroom, she saw someone unexpected sitting in the back row. Julian Bellmont. He stood when he saw her, looking uncomfortable. Rose, I'm sorry to show up like this. I tried calling your old number, but it was disconnected. What are you doing here? She asked, her voice careful. I came to apologize, he said. For Victoria. For how you were treated. It was wrong, and I should have stopped it the moment I realized what was happening. You're not responsible for your wife's actions, Rose said. Yes, I am. She represents me, our family, our company, and I let her cruelty go unchecked for too long. He looked down. We're getting divorced. It's been a long time coming, but that night at the gala made me realize I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Rose didn't know what to say. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Satisfaction, maybe, but also sadness. I'm also here because of Dorothy, Julian continued. She told me about the work you do here, teaching these kids, giving them opportunities. And I want to help. Bellmont Industries wants to fund this program. New supplies, better facilities, scholarships for the kids who excel. Whatever you need. Rose looked at him for a long moment. Why? Because Dorothy was right. I've been surrounding myself with people who value the wrong things. Money, status, appearances, and I've been blind to the people who actually make a difference. He met her eyes. People like you. Rose felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. I'll accept your help, but only if you actually show up. Not just write checks. These kids need role models. They need to see people who look like me and people who look like you working together. Making things better. Julian nodded slowly. I can do that. Then we have a deal. Over the next year, Julian kept his promise. He showed up every week, sometimes teaching the kids about business, other times just sitting and listening to their poetry. Rose watched him change, watched him become more human, more real, and slowly, carefully, something grew between them. Not romance, not at first, but respect, friendship, understanding. Dorothy watched it all with a knowing smile. I told you that you had fire, she said to Rose one afternoon, but I didn't realize you'd end up burning down the whole system. Rose laughed. I'm just getting started. The community center grew. More kids came. More volunteers showed up. The program expanded to other neighborhoods. Rose finished her degree and passed the bar exam. She became a lawyer, focusing on civil rights and helping people who couldn't afford legal representation. Victoria disappeared from public life. Some said she moved to Europe. Others said she was living in California, trying to reinvent herself. Rose didn't care. She had stopped thinking about Victoria a long time ago. 3 years after that night at the gala, Rose stood on a stage at the city's annual humanitarian awards ceremony. She was receiving an award for her work in the community. The room was filled with people who had once overlooked her, ignored her, treated her like she was invisible. But now, they were all standing, applauding, seeing her. Julian was in the front row, clapping the loudest. Dorothy sat next to him, tears streaming down her face. When Rose stepped up to the microphone, she looked out at the crowd and felt something she had never felt before in her life. Peace. 3 years ago, she began, I was invited to a party as a joke. Someone thought it would be funny to humiliate a cleaning lady, to remind her of her place, but that night changed my life. Not because of the cruelty I faced, but because of the kindness I found. Because of a woman named Dorothy, who saw potential in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Because of a man named Julian who chose to be better than he was. And because I made a choice. I chose to show up. I chose to stand tall. I chose to refuse to be made small. She paused, letting her words sink in. We all have that choice. Every single day. We can let the world tell us who we are, or we can decide for ourselves. We can let cruelty win, or we can fight back with grace and strength and unshakable self-worth. She looked directly at the camera filming the event, knowing her words would reach beyond this room. To everyone watching, who has ever been made to feel less than, who has ever been invited somewhere just to be mocked, who has ever been told they don't belong. I want you to hear this. You are enough. You are powerful. You are worthy. And no one, no matter how much money they have or how high their status, has the right to make you feel otherwise. The room erupted in applause. Rose smiled, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. Not as a cleaning lady, not as someone's goddaughter, not as a charity case or a project, just as Rose, and that was more than enough. Before you go, I want to hear from you one last time. If this story touched you, if it reminded you of your own worth, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that will move you, challenge you, and remind you of what really matters. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what part of Rose's journey hit you the hardest. Your words matter. Your voice matters. Just like Rose, you matter. Now go out there and show the world who you really are.